Hey everyone, and welcome to an episode of The Crowded Booth. Thursday night, 7:30, about 30 minutes past when we are usually live. But hey, we are happy to have you alongside with us today. If you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we really appreciate that. We want to go ahead and give a shout out to one of our local sponsors from Cook's Hot Dogs.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
That is Cook's Hot Dogs. We appreciate them being a sponsor of The Crowded Booth. If you're just joining us and you're saying, hey, I got a small business that I want to have on The Crowded Booth, all you have to do, if you're interested in advertising your business on the show, is email us at thecrowdedbooth@gmail.com. We really appreciate you tuning along. It's been a fantastic day of sports. In fact, the reason we started at 7:30 was because we were at the Braves game, enjoyed a great day at the Braves game. Obviously, they're having fans back in attendance. It's very huge for the culture and everything to go back up to. And I'll say this, too. It's been really big, too, for the fans to see their players once again. I mean, really, when you look at it, the excitement that was in the ballpark this past weekend for Atlanta, for the Braves, opening weekend was off the charts. And they're going to open that actually more up next, or coming into the next couple of days in their home series. Starting off with Arizona on the 23rd, they're going to do that. So we'll talk a little about the Braves, but first off, we're going to start with this big news out of today. The NCAA passes the one-time transfer rule. This was huge, absolutely huge, because prior, and if you let me explain the background of what kind of happened. Prior to any of this and kind of what was going on, you have to understand when a player wanted to transfer schools, it's a lot of politics involved with these situations. It was one of those things that was never easy. It was never one of those things that, whether you even when you wanted to go out of conference, it was one of those things that was a very tough venture to happen. And so for these players to be able to do that, I think that the biggest thing for them to do was to have it cleared so many different ways. And then let's also say this, they had to sit out a year. That was going to be the tough thing. We're going to invite a good friend of mine now into the show in Zach McKinnell. Let's bring him on the show because he's going to talk with us about this. He's a college football guy. He's got a great show. Zach, I appreciate you joining us today, man.
I appreciate it, man. I'm always down to come on here with you.
Yeah, and so I just want to get your opening thoughts on this because we're leading the show off with this, and then I'm going to dive into some stuff later. I'll let you go enjoy the rest of your Thursday. But this one-time transfer rule, obviously COVID, everyone's like, well, what's the difference? There's been a lot of stuff going on with a lot of these guys getting immediate eligibility. But for you, for the student athletes, How does this change and kind of, really change a lot of kids' decision? Because now they can know they can change not without COVID and have no penalty.
So let me say this. I don't think it's going to affect that 2-3 star kind of guy, maybe like the lower 4-star type of guys. But I think this goes more for the 5 high 4-star guys because, I mean, we all have aspirations of going to play for the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Floridas, the Ohio States. But what if it doesn't work out? Or what if you have an injury here or there? Or what if, look at Ohio State, CJ Stroud's primed to have his opportunity. Then you got Quinn Ewers coming in, who is almost looks like the perfect prospect, one of the highest graded guys ever. Why doesn't CJ deserve a chance to, I guess, go off and do his own thing if he decides to transfer? That's somewhat I kind of look at. And then I also look at why we allow coaches flexibility. Mm-hmm. If you look at I guess really anybody. I mean, look at the Kansas job right now. We're hiring on April 15th today. The coaches are in the middle of spring practice, middle of the recruiting cycle. But if a lower tier coach gets offered the Kansas job, there's no rule that says, hey, we've already started spring practice. You've already got recruiting plans. You've already got kids committed to your program. So we're going to have to make you stay. We don't do that for coaches. And there's really no reason we should do it for players, because the way I look at it is in most contracts, you look at quote unquote, people say contracts, but the conditions aren't always the same as when you committed. These kids commit at 16, 17 years old. Why in the world would we say, okay, you made a decision at 16, this is where you're going to have to get your degree. You're going to have to play under a coach that didn't recruit you. Your D-line coach got let go. You're going to have to play here. So I look at all these situations and say, I think this will better fulfill what student athletes need in the long term.
You really pointed out a big point for me, which is the flexibility that we allow coaches, even if they have these long, outstanding contracts. One big for me, and I wouldn't close the door on this, was Coastal Carolina's head coach signs that massive extension after a fantastic season. I think it was actually during the season he signed the extension. Yep. I mean, if he were to move, and let's say, Joe from Atlanta, Georgia wants to go play at Coastal Carolina, that's a big step, because talk to me also about schematically. There may be a whole schematic change on the offensive or defensive side of the ball that could affect the way a kid can feel like he can progress to the next level. And I mean, talk a little bit schematically how that allows some flexibility as well.
I mean, listen, you guys cover a lot of Georgia sports. Is there any better example than what happened at Georgia Tech a year or two ago when they switched? I mean, there is no bigger change than going from the triple option to a spread pass heavy. When you switch schemes like that, that's something. I mean, what if Army tomorrow said we're done with the triple option? We're gonna go the no huddle Gus Malzahn type offense. There would be probably 20, 25 kids that would have no idea where they would fit positionally in that. And then, I mean, I get that that's the extreme, but let's just look at Kirby Smart's scheme and what that power run attack they run at Georgia, and look at what Gus Malzahn ran in the past 8 years at Auburn. There would be players at wide receiver. A George Pickens would not fit into what Gus Malzahn wanted to do at Auburn. I think that's one of the reasons why he switched. You look at Anthony Schwartz, Seth Williams. How much could have Seth Williams' potential been maximized at Georgia, where he would have got more targets in the way that they play football? I think you're looking at stuff like that. And then offensive line, this is never talked about to me. And I listen to a lot of football podcasts. I follow a lot of people. What about a zone run blocker versus a power run blocker, and how different guys are built that way? We're doing a lot of NFL draft coverage right now, and there's certain guys you look at. Someone, I'm blanking on his name, Landon Dickerson from Alabama. He is so much better in the zone blocking aspect of his game than he is power blocking. But people are just like, oh, you have an offensive lineman need? Let's project him to go to this team when they're not a zone run team. And so Landon Dickerson won't fit that scheme. So just switching offensive coordinators could, like you said, could totally flip the script for a kid. And so I think Georgia Tech, and it's funny that we're on this podcast, would be the perfect example of how a scheme switch could flip a kid's whole potential up.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I mean, you have kids, and especially for a team like Georgia Tech or a team like Army that runs the triple option, that's making that move for specifically Georgia Tech to a spread. They're kind of going honestly from a triple option to spread option to that spread,
Yep.
and it's a gradual process. But there's kids still there that were recruited under Paul Johnson and for that scheme. So that brings up a great point, Zach. Before I let you go, I want you to be able to shout out what you do, where people can follow you, because this will not be the last time we have you on the show. So where can people find you and what you do?
Yeah, I co-host the Blue Blood CFB podcast, man. You can find us on Twitter, the Blue Bloods, and you can find us on YouTube, the Blue Blood CFB podcast. We release episodes 5 days a week, man. We got the 2-minute drill for us, and we're running a special right now, Big 10, the Big 12 in 30 days, where we have someone from every single Big 12 school on our podcast, and we're doing that all off season, man. So we're dropping a lot of content. We cover a lot of the same stuff y'all do, man, and we're big fans here. So hopefully I can come on here again.
Of course, man, and I love how you said this. There is no off season, especially with you guys over there that you're running. So I appreciate it, Zach. You have a fantastic. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. I appreciate you jumping on so quickly. Shot Zach a text right before, said, "Hey, can you come on? We'd love to talk to you about this." And he was obliged. So I do appreciate you coming on, man.
Absolutely, man. Let me know whenever you need me.
Awesome. We're going to head to a quick commercial break, and we will come back as we will be talking a little bit about some baseball. Zach hit the nail right on the head. He got himself an Instagrammable moment, but when we come back, you're going to hear once again from one of our sponsors, Cook's Hot Dogs in Columbus. We are Columbus's Sports Talk.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here on the Crowded Booth, we appreciate you watching. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, all those platforms, so give us a follow, hit the notifications bell. You can know when we go live. We appreciate that as well. Listen, fantastic day for Braves fans. Let's don't sugarcoat it. It had been a rough past 4 days, starting with what we talked about on the show on Tuesday, going back to that, and I would love your comments about that as well if you're watching the show. But for the Atlanta Braves, let's take another temp check. The Braves walk off against Miami to salvage the series. This was a series that was lost to a very talented, I would say underappreciated Marlins franchise that made the postseason last year, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they made it this year too. They have some great young pitching, and they have a team that just is put together very nicely. There's not a ton of big names. The broadcast team was talking a lot about this Braves team this Marlins team is one of those that has the ability to, take care of maybe some spare parts from some other teams, while also guys like Jazz Chisholm, who is fantastic young ball player, they were able to see retrieve. So a couple of years later, after they kind of tore down their team, Miami's reaping the benefits. But let's talk some Braves, because I want to get the temperature check in the room of this. And I think it's very, very important for us to keep in mind, what exactly do the Braves need to do? Obviously, today was what they needed to do. Atlanta needed a win heading into a road series against an inferior opponent in Chicago. They took the buses over to the air to Hartsfield-Jackson. They flew out, and they'll be playing Chicago at 2:20 Eastern. But specifically for this series, we take a look at Atlanta's schedule, and I want to make sure we understand this, because Atlanta right now is 5-8 through 13 games. And guys, listen, it's 13 games into this season, and there's no reason to worry. It's going to be completely okay. But I think we have to realize, we have to understand, this is where you have to find your team. And Brian Snitker said it best in some press conferences. You're really not going to know what you have in a team until possibly end of May, beginning of June, and that's when you can start to make some moves. But for the Braves to be successful, the bullpen needs to be a little bit better. The starting pitching is a little bit shaky, but I want to break all of this down, because obviously we know Ronald Acuna has continued his hot start. He is probably right now the best player in baseball in 2021. I mean, this guy is absolutely at the top of every single statistical category you can be at in a positive way in hitting category. So let's talk a little bit about and break down what the Braves have and what they don't have. I want to go back to the schedule, because I think that is absolutely huge for what we're trying to talk about. They open up on the road at Philadelphia. The Phillies are a good ball club, Braves fans. We got to realize that. We got to recognize that. They go on the road to the Nationals. They have the postponement The big thing with that Phillies series, they played on opening day on Thursday. Then they have the bye. Then they play 2. Another off day because of COVID. They play 1, and then they play 2. They sweep the doubleheader. Feeling some confidence about themselves. That rolls into the home opener against Philadelphia. 8-1, 5-4 win in those 2. And I think it's really important to understand. Sunday kind of set the tone for the week. Miami is a fantastic ball club, and we saw that first up hand of why they're so good. But you talk about what Philadelphia was able to do on Sunday, and it's the starting pitching for Atlanta that is kind of struggling a little bit. We want to say that, but the biggest thing is, as a fan, you have to say the starting pitching is struggling. But why, and how? Charlie Morton, fantastic pitcher. He's going to be okay. You look at the back of the baseball card often with these guys who have been in the majors and have established themselves a baseball card. It's going to be all right. You take a look now at some of the other young guys. Ian Anderson, great performance or great observation from today. Ian Anderson comes in. It's a day game. It's a road trip day because you're going to get on the bus. You got to shower quickly, get on the bus, and head off to the stadium or head off to the airport to play your next opponent. For Ian Anderson, this is really important for us to understand. This guy was absolutely dominant, but teams now have a book on him. They now have, if they don't, and I say the proverbial book because I'm talking about the fact that these teams have real live against major league hitters footage to look at. And that's really huge, very huge for these teams going forward. We have to understand that. So the Marlins did a great job of executing what they wanted to do in a game plan. And I think it's really important to see, as we already have some comments in here, I think like this is a great comment. Russell Ford offered, times like these are when you're going to find who the leaders are in the clubhouse. The Braves will figure it out. Russell, you've hit the nail right on the head. And for those watching, Russell's not even a Braves fan. It's okay. It's going to be all right. And then I love this one, Ralph Leary. It's all about Guillermo right now, the future of the Braves. Guillermo Heredia was obviously the starting center fielder today. The Braves have suffered some injuries. Max Fried goes on the IL. Christian Pache goes on the IL. But let's break it down and go back to that once again, because Atlanta has all the pieces that they need. Now, the argument can be made, could they go get Shane Green? Yeah, they can. They can do that. So can every single other ball club. That they can do that as well. 29 other ball clubs can do the same thing. What is the reason they haven't? It's probably going to come down to money. That's probably what it's going to come down to. And Braves fans don't want to hear that. But the reality of it is, this is not a big market team. This is not a squad that necessarily has money to spend. And the term financial flexibility has been thrown around. But you look at the Braves bullpen, and let's talk about how it's constructed. Obviously, Melanson goes out west. Okay, that would have been a pivotal part and a veteran piece. But A.J. Minter had shown strides that made you believe he can take that step. Will Smith, you knew, going back to the back of the baseball card talk, you knew that he was probably going to revert back to his all-star type of form. And so far, he's done a fantastic job. Listen, relievers are not going to go out there every single time, folks, and they're not going to just mow people down. And they're not just going to get 3 outs in an easy fashion. That brings me to a great reliever that I'm going to talk about here, and it's not popular among Braves fans, but Luke Jackson. Case in point, last night. This in with Luke Jackson, he works himself in and out of trouble. He still hasn't given up a run. And I know the memes and the jokes are out there from a lot of Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, but you have to realize, as long as you're getting the job done, I don't care. Personally, I don't care how you do it. I really don't care how you do it. And I'd love to hear the comments from you all as well. We appreciate everyone watching. But I think the biggest thing we have to realize, the pitching staff's going to come around. Ian Anderson's going to have his struggles. He just really didn't have them last year all that much. And that's the big thing. And that's the case in point. That's the tough story. He really didn't have them all that much, but he's going to. There's the book out on him now. And I know the conversation is, well, it's going to shift from, well, maybe we should have went and paid money. Well, that's just not going to happen. It's just not. The Braves are never going to dole out $200 million for a starter. It's just not how they're built. And I would argue too, I wouldn't want to do that. You have to at least figure out what you have in these young guys. And I think that's the biggest thing you're figuring out right now. The tough part about it, and some of the growing pains that come from that, is you're going to have to figure it out while you're also competing for a World Series. That's Atlanta. That's what they've kind of found themselves in. Back in 2017 and 2008, or let's say 2018, the baseball gods tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, you're going to the postseason a year earlier than maybe you thought. And that's what Atlanta's done. Were they necessarily ready? All of those young guys ready? No. Even in Max Fried's case, I mean, the guy was dominant last year. But there's very few elite pitchers in this game. When you talk about some of these elite guys, Jacob deGrom's a perfect example up in New York. This guy goes in and he's so consistent, and that's what makes the big difference. You can't expect Max Fried. Even when Mike Soroka comes back, it's not going to be like Mike Soroka is going to be the savior. He's going to have to work himself back. Now, who knows? We may be wrong, might be completely wrong on this aspect. But I think we have to understand, have to realize that the Braves are going to be okay on the pitching staff side. Drew Smyly is going to go for them against Chicago. Smiley's going to be fine. He's an awesome option as your fourth or fifth in the rotation. And the guy that, Ralph talked about on the show earlier this week that I'm excited about is Huascar Ynoa, who we're going to see on Saturday against Chicago. Leading me into this series against Chicago, I think that the biggest thing the Braves should and can do, if you can get a sweep at Chicago and you come back, you're feeling pretty, because we have to understand the NL East is really hard, arguably the toughest division in all of baseball from top to bottom, because everyone seemingly feels like they have a chance and they put themselves in a position to win. Now, at the end of the year, are the records going to show that? Not necessarily, because these teams are beating up on each other because they're playing each other 6 times a year. But I think we have to remember and we have to realize, people, is for the Braves, you got to win the games that you can win. And it feels weird saying this, but the Cubs are one of those teams right now that you feel comfortable you can go in there, at least take 2 out of 3. Bobby Cox, Hall of Fame manager, longtime Braves, also front office and manager on the field, said this: if you go in and take 2 out of 3 every single series, you're gonna feel good about your ball club. And I think when you look at how the Braves schedule stacks up, we talked about it. Phillies for 3, the Nationals, both of those series on the road, back home against Philadelphia, and then the Marlins in a 4-game set. That is a tough opening series because you're playing divisional opponents who know you best. It's not like you're playing the Pittsburgh Pirates, who you see twice a season. You're playing these guys who know you best. There's bad blood. There's relationships between both the ball clubs, and they know what your best is. And I think that's one of the tough things we have to realize. They're going to go on the road to the Cubs. You got to feel good about that one if you're an Atlanta fan. If Atlanta goes up to Chicago and gets swept, then maybe you could start to worry. I think that's where the conversation could happen. Could you start to worry? And that's kind of what we're talking about right now. We appreciate if you're just tuning in. We're talking about the Braves. Braves, obviously, the walk-off winners today, 7-6 over the Marlins, which it was an ugly win, but it's a win. And you would take, and correct me if I'm wrong, folks, I would take an ugly win 9 times or 10 times out of 10 over a unlucky loss. And that's what Atlanta was able to do today. They're going to go on the road for a little short 2-game stint at the Yankees. That is going to be pivotal. Listen, that's going to have a lot of national type of headlines. That was a popular World Series pick heading into this season. The Yankees, the Braves, the guys that spend all the money, the homegrown young talent who have added some veteran pieces. And we're going to talk about some of those veteran pieces in the lineup. And then you come back home against Arizona. So let's walk through here. The Braves sit at 5-8 right now. Overall, if you can go up to Chicago, and let's just say they take 2 out of 3. Let's say they take 2 out of 3. You're sitting at 7-9. You have you're winners of 3 of your last 4. You're feeling good about yourself. If you can split with New York, make it back to Atlanta, and take on Arizona and then Chicago again at home, you could find yourself at the end of April with a 500 or winning record. And that's all that these guys are asking for. Look, folks, it's been a weird year. Even obviously, we haven't had a ton of COVID cancellations so far this season. Atlanta has had their postponement that they had to make up with Washington a week ago. I think we need to realize it's a big thing. And a good friend Ralph, he pointed this out to me the other day. He said, talk about the mental psyche of these guys, especially for Freddie Freeman. It's a great story. If you haven't checked out the documentary, you definitely should have. That's over on ESPN Plus. It's a E60 feature they did on Freddie Freeman. But New has 2 newborns. He's got a young son, got a wife that he couldn't see for months on months. That is there's a tough mental side to this game that too often, and I was sitting in the stands today and you hear some of the chatter amongst the fans, and too often I think we lose a little bit of the reality that these are human beings who have families, who have mental states. They're humans just like us. And so I don't necessarily enjoy that part of being in the stadium. Now, don't get me wrong. Being back at Truist Park, seeing the Braves, obviously today was a big day. It was Jackie Robinson Day. All the players wearing 42, honoring the hero that Jackie Robinson is. It's really big. And I think that's just a big thing for us to just kind of take into account and kind of understand. But speaking of the lineup, going back to the lineup, for Atlanta, Ronald Acuna Jr. is unreal. He could do no wrong right now, as Chip Carey said on the broadcast the other day. He is doing a fantastic job. when you get to the rest of the lineup, there's some guys struggling. Snicker has already kind of rearranged this lineup to where you look at it and you could say, the Braves have, some trouble. There's a lot of 100 averages. Listen, it's all right. They've had around 40 to 50 at-bats. They're going to get going. These guys have the track record. And I think we have to remember that. Marcell Ozuna, he was fantastic last year. We told you that was a 2-month stint. That's what we said here on this show. You can't expect him to continue to make that impact. And I think that's what we have to understand. For the full 162. Now, I'm not saying Marcell Ozuna won't make an impact. Freddie Freeman, he's going to be fine. Ozzie Albies, they'll be fine. You got to give this team, and you remember 2 years ago, Josh Donaldson was a perfect example. Came over to Atlanta, struggled, something clicked, and he was able to, transform the way that this ball team played. And right now, Ronald Acuna is shouldering the load along with Kung Fu Panda, Pablo Sandoval doing a fantastic job as well. So that's just a little bit of temperature check. Let's calm down. Let's get there as we have the latest, from the Braves, and obviously they're going to be heading to Chicago, 2:20 Eastern start, all-day games for Friday and Saturday, which typically would be some night games, but then you roll over on Sunday, another Sunday night baseball appearance for Atlanta. We're wrapping up this little bit mini show here tonight where we have some final thoughts. We're going to stay in the state of Georgia here, and I want to bring this up because I think it's a great topic. I saw this as Georgia came out with a couple sports lines coming out at around 9.5 wins this year. And I think when you look down Georgia's schedule and what they have going for them this season, this could be something where Georgia fans would say, this has got to be the year. It's got to be the year. And listen, seemingly every single year, Georgia fans are saying this. It's got to be the year. This has got to be the year that it happens. And I think we have to maintain, and you have to say to yourself, Kirby Smart is a fantastic coach. He's recruited well. They're just in the midst of playing and seeing one of the most dominant runs we've ever seen in college football, in sports, really, with what Alabama's doing. And so I think we need to understand that as well. So keep that in mind. For me in this, over under 9 wins, I think Georgia hits the over. I think they can get to 10 wins, maybe 11. Obviously, they're going to have the big two are going to be Florida and Clemson. Week 1, you're going to learn a lot about what this Georgia team is week 1 against Clemson. If they win that one, it could be a pretty special season for the fans up in Athens. But listen, we appreciate you tuning in for the mini show. Richard Leary, I do see your comments. We got to get on some MLF stuff as Alton Jones wins the Heavy Hitters Championship. Crazy. And he lets me know that is the latest in Major League Fishing news. But listen, we appreciate you tuning in. It was just a quick show. We wanted to get that out to you. But we do have a fun podcast that is going to be launching tomorrow ahead of A-Day over in Auburn, Alabama. We're going to be talking with one of their big beat writers and talking about what to expect from Auburn in this new schematic. So I do appreciate you watching. And once again, I want to hit this again. If you would like to have your business advertised here on the Crowded Booth as we ramp up some coverage heading into the summer and getting ready for another fall slate here in the Chattahoochee Valley area, email us at thecrowdedbooth@gmail.com. Shoot us a DM on social media. You can find us at The Crowded Booth, all of those places. And once again, we appreciate you watching and hope you all have a